Hi, I'm Berin Szoka of TechFreedom. I'm here today with Jeff Pulver. Jeff is one of the pioneers of VoIP service. If you use Vonage, if you've ever used any of the many services today that let you make calls over the internet, you really have Jeff Pulver to thank for getting those services for free. Jeff, back in 1995, started Free World Dial-Up, eventually founded Vonage, and in 2004, 2005, spent a year trying to get the Federal Communications Commission not to regulate VoIP service. So we're here today to talk to Jeff about his experience with VoIP, fighting to keep it free of government regulation, and what he has to say today about people who are trying to subject the internet to Title II, the very thing that he fought against back in 2004. Jeff Pulver, thank you for joining us. So Jeff, everyone's talking about internet freedom these days. You held the first internet freedom rally back in 2004. What were you doing, and why were you so upset about internet freedom back then?
Well, actually, the first Freedom Rally was 2000, and when most people were sleeping, I woke up and I saw this noise that people who were being disrupted by the innovation of internet communications wanted to, in my opinion, stop the disruption by creating roadblocks. And so what we discovered back in the 90s with the advent of voice on the internet was that voice was an application, not a service. People in the phone companies back then had a hard time dealing with the reality that anybody could actually offer a voice service. Effectively, anybody could talk to anywhere in the world, and distance did not matter anymore because the internet made the world flat. And as this became big business, as the technology improved so that now it's usable, there was a lot of disruption. So there was a fear that some people behind the scenes were trying to force it so that if you're an application, that you have to register as a phone company. And we thought that was preposterous. The fact that, because on the internet, if you're using a website, if you're using a browser, if you and I are communicating via some app that you and I wrote, why would we have to register with the FCC or someone? It was nuts. I was really just worried about the future, and I wanted to create as great a greenfield opportunity as possible so that the fear of regulation was not there. And what was happening was, back in meetings, people were talking about, well, what if this gets regulated? People will not get funded. A lot of the internet innovation happened because it was a hands-off the internet approach. I mean, the FCC, to their credit, looked at voice over IP ultimately as a nascent industry that should be hands-off and let it grow. But Townsend Dingle was the first threat to the freedom us on the internet had. So in June of 2000, myself and some friends, we hosted the first Internet Freedom Rally on the steps of the US Capitol. And then a year later, the rhetoric got so bad, we did it again. And the first time we had about 1,500 people come out, the second time about 6,000. And people were concerned. I mean, the same people that now we have millions of people fighting for net neutrality or Title II or whatever the current words are. Back then, 6,000 people, I would argue that 6,000 people on the steps of the US Capitol in June of 2001 is pretty significant relative to where the internet was in the mindset of people around here compared to where we are today all these years later. And so my fear of bad things happening by accident has always been around. And I'm fearful today because I do believe that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And that, yes, we should, of course, people should be held to certain standards. Yes, we should be, of course, be accountable for our actions. But I don't like being bullying from the pulpit. I don't like people trying to take policies that were written 30 years ago that had no intention to be used against a certain technology to be applied against that technology from blooming.
So when you were pioneering VoIP service in the 90s, in the early part of the last decade, internet freedom meant hands off the net, keeping the government out of it, making sure that you didn't have to go register with the FCC, preventing the government from strangling new technologies. And today it means something very different. Today it means regulation of one form or another. What do you think changed?
A couple of things. I think there's a amnesia that people forgot. Some people gave up and other people forgot about what was possible. And a lot of other people just went with it and decided, okay, we are now going to be regulated. We're going to deal with regulation. Because what happened was, as the technology evolved, back in the day when it was just entrepreneurs with no telecom background, anything becomes possible because it's blue sky. And that we don't think about the impact, we just do. Anything was possible. We didn't know better. But then the technology was adopted by the phone companies, and all of a sudden, voice over IP becomes a nascent technology used by telcos around the world. And the people who come into the business are not the entrepreneurs, They're the people with experience, arguably bad experience, people used to living and operating in a regulatory regime. So that all of a sudden now senior management in these companies that are not startups anymore are run by experienced telecom professionals. So the mindset changed. All of a sudden the net heads get replaced by bellheads. And the world changed. From the perspective of who's running the companies, the entrepreneurs exited, and they did not necessarily come back into the communications, and they were replaced by the legacy.
So it's people who had been used to dealing with the FCC
Before.
who knew how to play the game of regulatory capture.
And frankly, I object to all of that. I mean, I as a consumer, I remember waking up in 6th grade and having a 110 baud modem. And last night I had 50 megs in my house. And I didn't have to do anything. I just have to grow older. And the magic of a competitive market gave me 110 baud, gave me 50 megs. The internet happened despite the FCC. It was a hands-off approach that allowed competition to flourish. And I believe where we are today is if the competition could continue to operate competitively the way it's been, things will be okay. But because certain people with market power are able to incite riots virtually and get millions of people to rise up, we're in a situation where people don't even realize what they're doing, but the impact of it is playing checkers in a world where chess is played. What
do you mean by that?
Well, people that are pushing for a certain type of regulation today are thinking maybe a half a step ahead. They're not thinking 3 steps ahead. They have no idea about the impact of what's going to happen if they have it their way. And in the world of communications, one of the amazing things about the internet, it's empowered millions of people, billions of people today to actually connect with each other. And in some ways, if you were to look at some of the most popular way that people are connecting on the internet today, if you were a regulator, you could say, well, this should be a regulated service, that should be a regulated service, but it's not. It's free and it's open. FaceTime, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Skype, whether it's a variety of other products that are right on the cusp of making it. And all these companies are flourishing not because they want to bypass access charges, they're flourishing because it's a wonderful idea and a great way to connect communities with each other, and more will happen. If these people had any fear or doubt that all of a sudden they now have to register with the FCC and pay fees, and they would not do this, they would do something else at the same time. But the magic of no regulation, the magic of blue skies for the opportunity to communicate is empowering a broadband-enabled world literally to be more connected, literally to be more together, and that's amazing, and that's awesome. And so my fear is that, sure, you can regulate, register, whatever you want to put in place to make a certain business issue happen, but the impact of getting that wish granted will mean all of a sudden all these next generation communication services go away. And that the millennials that have grown up in a world with Snapchat and FaceTime, they're not going to actually understand that they wake up tomorrow and the world's different. Their world changed because they had their way. They had their one wish granted. And all of a sudden, poof.
And that one wish is this term, Title II.
Yeah.
So you spent years of your life fighting against Title II to try to make sure that voice service as an app wasn't regulated under the regulations developed for AT&T back in the 1930s.
Right. I believe that this is now 2014 becoming 2015. It's possible in the next 10 to 20 years there will be meaningful communication laws introduced in America that will acknowledge the existence of the internet and will figure out ways to enable entrepreneurship and competition and see for a positive future. But today where we are, with all the laws that are on the books, they do not even presume the internet's around. I mean, the 96 Act touches on it, not really the way we need it to. So I am totally against trying to take old laws and apply them to new tricks. It does not work. And at best, it's a messed up situation that will always need patch quilts and patchwork always to try to catch up. And so, this year notwithstanding, if we could pretend that 2014 didn't happen and Netflix wasn't inciting all these people, we were pretty okay. And I like to go back to being pretty okay and not having people worry about Title II. Because most people, they don't know what Title II is, but they're saying, oh, we want Title II.
So you explained your fear about Title II, that thinking 3 steps ahead, playing chess, in your words, when you said that the madness of applying Title II means declaring everything telecom and opening the door for services like the ones that you developed, like FaceTime, like Netflix.
To be treated and regulated like telecom. And that would be, as far as I'm concerned, the day of death for innovation and communications.
Because those people would go off and do other
They
things?
would definitely do other things. If we were to sit down and talk to any of those founders and say, are you prepared to run your company now as a phone company? No one is.
So the people who are pushing for Title II seem very confident that it's not going to affect them, that they can draw a clear line and that only broadband providers will be subject to Title II. You don't agree?
No, because what they're really pushing for is a regime of what's known as forbearance versus non-forbearance, which means whoever is the king or the queen of the FCC, they decide at their moment what to do. And unless that the person who's promoting this idea for Title II has a crystal ball and can tell us the future exactly how it's going to happen, it's all bullshit. I'm sorry. And I do not trust their ability to tell me the future. I do not trust their ability to tell me what's going to happen. So I am paranoid to be protective for everyone else, because I do believe that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few of the one. And Title II is just harmful to the way we live today, and your quality of life will go down if Title II happens. And I don't want to say, I told you so. I just want to stop it.
And so the forbearance question is, once you get to Title II, how much of it do you apply? You've warned that the people who are pushing for Title II may find that it applies to them in the first place, and you said very beautifully that the line between Title II and Title I it's not a clear one. It exists only in the mind of whoever happens to be the FCC chairman. Why don't they see that? The people that used to be your allies,
They do see that. They just don't want to say it because they know I'm right. And they're using their bully pulpit for business purposes, and they're trying to extract out blood from a stone for their own benefit only. They don't care about anyone else. They care about themselves, but they have the power and marketability to get all these other people who don't know any better to push and say their lines for them as puppeteers. The people that are pushing Title II are the ultimate puppeteers in Washington. And I just don't want to have to come back and say, I told you so, because frankly, a life without Snapchat, without FaceTime, without Skype, is a life that's going to be a lot more challenging than we have today.
So why do you care so much about connection? Where does this come from in your own experience?
It comes from growing up. I mean, I happen to grow up in a world where radio is how I connected. I'm a ham radio operator, have been for life. And I discovered a cure for loneliness was connectedness. And so it provides a level of empowerment. And for me, I always have a need to connect. I believe in the connectedness so that you're not by yourself, that in a world of many, there are people to reach out to. And so I've forever been out, I've always been in the world of communications, whether I was 7 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old, or whatever, that we all have a need as people to feel that connection. And what I love about the internet is that it has an ability for all of us to find common ground, for all of us to actually open up and connect. And I'm fearful that when you start putting these roadblocks in for these connected services, that all of a sudden people who otherwise could have connected won't. And that's what really messes me up, that it's my fear that we're going to introduce by accident, under the law of unintended consequences, all these other things, which, oh, we never thought about that. Oh, that would never happen. Bullshit. You know about it. You just don't want to say it. That's what I'm worried about, because I'm thinking 3 steps ahead. Because frankly, if there was no impact, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't be here right now. I would be doing other things. I have a lot of other things to do than to come to Washington and say, guys, wake up!
So as you think 3 steps ahead, what do you think is likely to happen here, and what do you want to happen?
I want people to understand that the life we have is pretty darn good. That the fact that you can wake up and have 50 megs in your house, maybe it's not a gig that your neighbors in Stockholm have, but it's pretty darn good. The fact that you can connect with anyone freely on the internet today and be connected and have a family unit where whether you're diverse and dispersed across America or you're all connected in the same city, that you have the ability to be there to listen, connect, and share and engage with each other, that's an amazing thing. The moment some of those elements start to fall off because all of a sudden those services that you relied on that are part of your fabric are no longer there, you start to fall apart. So, and I'm fearful that the people that are pushing just their agenda don't care about anyone else and any other thing. They just care about their agenda. And so when I look at the future, I like to have a connected future where we have the freedom to communicate, the freedom to connect at will from anywhere to anywhere. And that's what may go away. So what happens today, hopefully the best thing that happens right now is nothing. Hopefully, despite the best efforts of all the politicians and all the lobbyists, nothing happens. Hopefully Congress doesn't do anything, and life as we know it just continues. And maybe there's a chance to legislate some of these great ideas and innovative ideas and make America a place where entrepreneurs want to be at, and to create a future that we're all proud of, rather than looking to the past and trying to prevent innovation from happening.
So ideally, you'd like to see a rewrite of the Communications Act, but it sounds like you're pretty skeptical that that's going to happen.
Forget about the Communications Act. We need something brand new. We need something that has no legacy, where it was never conceived of before, where we come in with an open mind and say, okay, we have to do things to protect our consumers. We have to do things for markets. We have to do things for business. What can we do? Because we know what the future, we know where the past is. We've seen innovation happen, but we want to create an environment so that for the next 100 years, there's more innovation and more communication. The fundamental problem with regulating this is that people assume that innovation stopped. And that's the problem, because innovation didn't stop. It's always moving forward. There's always something happening that someone else wants to come in and fix to stop, because they're disrupting someone else. Disruption in a positive way will always continue when markets are working. And the laws that we have as we know it, for 50, 60, 70 years, for 120 years, not too much innovation. But since the 90s, since certainly the advent of voice over IP came into the communications area, the world changed. And some people have to just want to retire and not deal with it. Other people, before they retire, they want to fix it. But they can't fix it, because they're not going to stop the future from happening. They're not going to stop innovation, because at the end of the day, I believe it's the freedom to think clearly and the freedom to innovate that drives all of this, and the opportunity to discover magic, right? Because at the end of the day, what are we about? We're about dreams. We want to create an environment here in the United States so anyone who comes from anywhere can have a dream come true. I happen to dream communications. I like to believe that it is a blue sky wherever we go, that if it's raining, that above the clouds there is sunshine, that we could find it and we can embrace it. And I do not want to have a regulatory regime in place that gives us rainy days all the time with no sun.
Of course, the people who are pushing that regulatory regime use the same words you're using. They think that they're promoting innovation. Where did they go wrong? Is it thinking that innovation stopped and that
yes.
They're trying to preserve?
They're trying to preserve for their own greedy good what they have. And they're not assuming innovation is continuing. They think that they're it. And I will differentiate and I'll say, look, if you actually look in the last 12 years in the history of what would be called net neutrality, you will find very few flagrant problems that certain people behave badly in. Very few. And if you look at anyone's behavior in the last 10 or 12 years, I think more people have behaved badly than these companies. And arguably, people will behave badly. I think companies would admit it. But I would not put forth a regulatory regime in place to prevent what's really not happening from ever happening. I think that we should deal with it on a case-by-case basis. I think that we really want to create an environment so that people that are not from communications stumble into it and discover magic. I mean, I have no background in telecom. I graduated with an accounting degree. I taught myself how to write code. But fundamentally, I got into communications because I was lonely as a kid, and I found ham radio. And then 20 years after I was a ham operator, I discovered voice over IP as a hobbyist. And as a hobbyist, I experimented in a world where no one told me no. I just tried things. And then I discovered social media 10 years after that, simply as a hobbyist, looking at how things were connecting and people were communicating. I think we need more people with no background in communications to disrupt communications. And the only way that's going to happen is to stop people like the folks that are trying to suffocate innovation today without even realizing it, and creating a world that's conducive to a positive future for everyone else.
So the debate really seems to come down to whether you regulate in advance, whether you write prescriptive rules before there's a problem.
Yeah, it's sort of Minority Report. I saw that movie. I wasn't really a big fan of the movie then. I am not a fan of Minority Report rules, and for regulation. I'm not.
Of punishing pre-crime before it happens.
No.
Okay, so we'll deal with real problems when they arise. So I agree with you, but the FCC, part of their argument here is that it's two things. That they say that broadband providers have a very strong incentive to do bad things, so we've got to get them before they do. And then second, they say there's this virtuous circle whereby if we just steer broadband providers in the better direction, this will be good for them too, because they'll actually benefit from a flourishing of apps and services. So what you're describing, you described a world where you changed how Verizon operated. You pushed them in a direction where they became an app company.
The reality is no one at the FCC has my background. No one at the FCC has stood up and accomplished what I've done. And I haven't done that much, but I've stood up and I've lived a dream, and I continue to. I am a disruptor. These people at the FCC are bureaucrats. Good ones, but they're bureaucrats. And they're trying to preserve their future. They want to preserve their meaningfulness for the way they see the world. So in their world, the FCC, of course, is very important. And of course, they must regulate, they must do this, must do that, because they need purpose. You know, I have my own purpose, you have purpose, we live with purpose and intention. The FCC is lacking entrepreneurship. The FCC is lacking disruptors. The FCC are lacking people that they're trying to regulate against. They don't know how to they don't think like an entrepreneur. The end result is, here's what happens. If what you're talking about actually were to happen, you're going to see CapEx spending go way down. You're going to see billions, I won't say trillions, but billions and billions of dollars of value from the telecom sector go away. And you're going to see an era of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in capital markets in communications, because at the end of the day, it's no fun to invest in telecom in America anymore.
If it's governed by Title II.
That's right. So we're talking about, you know, a hit to the economy. So not only, see, I don't want to be right about this because the price is way too high. And I feel it. I feel it in my bones. That they go ahead and they Title II this. Oh, I won't say $1 trillion write-off and we should start shorting now. I'm not shorting because I'm going long. I'm going long on the future. I'm going long believing that somebody out there will make the right choice and not push for Title II. That they'll find a compromise, which may be doing nothing, but maybe doing nothing is the best thing for now.
So, and behind all that is an optimism about disruption, being able to deal with the concerns that people who are pushing for regulation are talking about.
We want to create that environment. We want more people like me coming and doing crazy stuff. That's good. Because at the end of the day, that's how the future happens. I'm one of millions of people that have lived a dream, and that we challenge the status quo but not even knowing what we're doing. You know, I didn't go to school for communications. I didn't go to school to be a disruptor. I didn't go to school to be an entrepreneur. I'm just me. And I want to find other people of like mind who have a chance to believe, to go ahead and believe in their future and to believe in themselves. And they'll deal with rules when they have to deal with rules. But I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just trying to speak my mind and trying to get some people to think a few steps ahead of themselves rather than, you know, at the end of their nose.
Clearly there are a few million people out there who are really concerned about broadband companies. They think that they're looking to squelch apps just like yours. You fought some of those companies yourself by building a VoIP service. What would you say to them to try to steer them in a better direction and make them more optimistic about a future without Title II?
To think outside the box that they see. Because every generation has someone that's going to disrupt them. Every generation has people that, aha, I should have thought of that. There's going to be billionaires again and again from people just doing things a little bit differently. And of course, if these people could see it, they'll do it. All we want to do is to preserve the future so that your kids and your grandchildren want to live in America and have an opportunity to be successful in whatever their passions are. I happen to be a passionate communicator. I believe in the internet. I'm very happy for the way things have been. And if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't change anything. I like it the way it is, and I do not want anyone to mess up what happened. And I'm just really, really worried that by the accident of not speaking up, by being passive, that bad things will happen. So I'm being accountable. And I hope other entrepreneurs who have also benefited from this communication world will stand up and speak their mind. I don't have to agree with you. I just ask you to speak your mind. Because right now, people from outside of Washington are not coming in and they're not talking about what's happening. And I think that's a mistake.
So everyone's in favor of permissionless innovation. You're trying to make sure that we don't have to get permission from the government.
That's right. I don't want to move into a world where I have to look to the king or the queen of the FCC for permission to do what I do. I'd like to do.
And at the same time, you're not as concerned about the broadband company being the king or the queen because you think that they'll be dethroned.
They will be dethroned. If you abuse your power, the consumers will riot against you and will out you. We're not living in a world where it's just one-sided, right? If you do something badly, the people will respond with horrific viral videos. People's behavior there's a code of conduct and code of ethics that is not going to be tolerated because the public will not tolerate it. So we're not talking about absolute rule, and in between are business issues. Some of those business issues maybe have to go to court. Maybe some of these business issues have to be resolved by a mediation, but not by regulation. I mean, I cannot tell you any reason in the last 10 years how the threat of, or the internet, the regulated internet has ever been good for business. Good for lobbyists, good for politicians, but not so much good for the entrepreneur. And I just think that we have a chance to see a more perfect future by empowering ourselves to care.
And if there is anti-competitive behavior, if a broadband company really does try to stop you,
then beat up on them. Hold them accountable. Hold them accountable, damn it. I mean...
And you don't need Title II to do that.
You don't need Title II. You just have to stand up and fix.
So just take the example of all the telephone companies that you fought against. In the end, you've helped to build demand for their broadband service.
And not only have I helped to build demand for the broadband service, I gave them a light to actually be innovative in internet communications. So they actually, a role benefited because they realized that voice as an application is much better for them than voice as a service. And that in many cases, broadband has offered a greenfield opportunity for them to be innovative and offer and do things they never could have done before. Because at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about internet communications, it offers us all a chance to do things never before practical or possible. And that's what I'm fighting for is that. What I'm fighting for is a chance to be innovative and think through boxes that are being created around us because people don't get us. People don't really understand what the words I'm even saying mean. But they sometimes will see the impact of what happened because maybe I was wrong, maybe I was right, but stuff happens. And so I know that right now is the wrong time in where we are to go quiet. We have to speak up. Rightfully, wrongfully, we have to speak up and at least provide a voice. And that's why
and in
I'm
a
here.
nutshell, the voice says, what's the message to government?
The basic voice here, say no to Title II and allow innovation to flourish.